episode tonight, talking about navigating difficult conversations, something we've probably all been doing a lot of lately. So I'm excited to learn more about that. And along those lines, before we get started, I would love to hear from all of you all in our poll. So we just have two questions tonight relevant to this talk. The first one is, how confident do you feel about your ability to manage difficult conversations? Answer choices are, I manage difficult conversations with ease. I do okay, but I could do better. I could really use some help. Or difficult conversations, what's that? Then we have, I'm sure someone's going to answer that, but it will not be me. And then question two, when something is really bothering you in a relationship, do you usually A, avoid it like the plague, B, hold it in as long as I can, then explode, C, have a productive conversation where everyone feels heard and progress is made, or D, other? So, and other could be a lot of things. So we'll be looking forward to see your responses to that, and we'll bring those up a little bit later. So we'll leave that up for just a second. But while people are answering that, Helen, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here? What is RfRx?
What are we doing here?
Question.
I know. So if you are here and you're interested to find out why you're here, the reason why you're here is because you want to hear from guests that talk about a whole bunch of different topics. So this is not a replacement, though, if you're part of our online community or our support groups. This is just some supplemental information that you can use in your life to become a little smarter, more informed, think about things a little bit differently. So that is why we do this podcast. It's also a good way to get some good advice and learn some coping skills, a compliment to the communities and that sort of thing. So because we have a bunch of different, we have scientists and psychologists and people that have left religions, authors, all different types of people that come on here and talk a bunch about different topics relating to skepticism and recovering from religion and all that, and to become a critical thinker and all that great stuff. So that's why you're here. So if you do not want to learn about these things, you need to, and there's obviously somewhere else that you have to be, but I hope you'll stay, because this will be a really great topic that we're having tonight. Also too, if you have any topical questions, comments, hate mails, inquiries, if you want to do a talk with us, please write us an email, and Cara will get back to you and tell you about many, many things that you want to know about, answer your questions, respond to your hate mail. Might tell you you're a butthead for writing a hate mail, but that might happen too. Or if you want to do a talk, you can come and do a talk with us. We would love to have you. Also too, if you want to see all of our previous RfRx recordings or listen to them, you can go to our YouTube page, where videos are a little bit behind, but most of them are up there. Also too, if you want to get like the latest episodes, you can go to Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our channel and listen to us there while you're at work or jogging or gardening, or you need something to fall asleep to. I don't know, but you can find us there. Anyway, Cara, can you tell us not only why we are here, but why Recovering from Religion does these things, and a little bit about the organization that we're a part of?
Why, yes, I can. I'm so glad you asked. That was what I was going to talk about next. It's like you read my mind. You might be a psychic. I'm a fearless psychic. A fearless psychic. And yes, I would be glad to talk about that. So we've been talking about RfR, throwing those initials around. That stands for Recovering from Religion. And our mission statement is to offer hope, healing, and support to those struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. So how are we doing those three things? Well, first of all, for healing, we mainly offer our helpline. And that is something you can access 24/7 online or on the phone, where you can get in touch with somebody who is a trained agent standing by to take your call, but not sell you anything. They're actually just going to listen to you with a non-judgmental, empathetic ear, hear about what's going on with you, and probably share some resources with you that you will hopefully find helpful. And that's basically what they're going to do. It's a peer support helpline. They're not professionals, but they are well trained, and they're able to probably, if not understand personally what you've been going through, they're probably able to link you into some resources that might be relevant for you. So I highly recommend it. Feel free to hop onto our website to get either in touch over the phone or on the chat with them. And then secondly, hope. The way we try to offer that is mainly through sharing and listening to personal stories. And the idea is that we're all in this together. We may not all be going through the exact same thing, but somebody out there may have a story or a personal experience that they can share that really gives a lot of hope for you, or you might be able to learn something or be inspired by it, or just encourage each other through learning and hearing about those experiences. And so we offer that through our blog and our podcast that you can find online at medium.com/excommunications for the blog. And then the podcast is on our website, recoveringfromreligion.org/podcast, as Helen already mentioned. And then support. So we do this a couple of ways. We have our peer support groups, which have face-to-face in-person meetings, or, well, they used to all be face-to-face in-person meetings, but during the times of COVID, we went virtual. So they're online, but there is also sort of, I believe some of them are going to go back in person again if they haven't already. But there's definitely still going to continue to be support groups that are meeting online. So you can still join those. And the great thing about that is we have more than 60 groups. I think is it 61, Helen? Do I have that number right?
That was like 63. I don't remember.
It's
I don't know.
63.
We have a lot. It's over 60 people.
Yeah. And Helen is one of our support group leaders, so you might see her at some of them if you need more Helen in your life, which who doesn't? And
exactly.
So, yeah, come on. So you can check those out. Find one close to you. Going through our website, and they're all through Meetup. But also, again, you don't have to pick the one that's closest to you because they're still having virtual meetings. So you can still join, even if, there's one that's meeting in Australia and you happen to like the time zone or whatever, and you can join that one. It's totally okay. You don't have to, show proof of residence or anything like that. And then there are some times where maybe peer support isn't enough and you might be looking for something more professional. And so for that, we have the Secular Therapy Project, and that is where we connect you with, or provide you the opportunity to connect with, a licensed secular mental health care provider. And all of the providers that are part of the Secular Therapy Project have been screened so that we know that they have the appropriate licensing in their state or country. They maintain a secular practice, which means that they're not going to be proselytizing to you. They're not going to be sending you home to go buy crystals or goop eggs and put them inside of your body or anything like that. Don't do that. And
don't put jade eggs in your vagina, people. Don't do it.
It's not good. It's not
don't
good.
do it.
I'm not that kind of doctor, but I'm pretty sure that's not good for you. So they will only be using evidence-based treatments. So if that's something that you might be interested in doing, not the jade eggs, the evidence-based treatments, check it out at seculartherapy.org. And then how about the online community, Helen?
Yeah, so let's segue over to the online community. So if you, we have an online community that if you are on our Slack, you have to be invited, though. That is a secret club. So if you, it's super secret. And so basically you have to, if you chat or call into the helpline and an agent thinks that you would benefit from the online community, they will invite you and you can join our community, which has a bunch of different groups, and you can find support and more information of the things we have going on at RfR. But we have so many different types of channels on Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholic, Muslim, LGBTQ plus, empowered woman, all, like, whatever little niche you fall into, you have a home on the online community. So that is a good way to network and meet with other people. There's online meetings. We have a hangout with all the volunteers and with members of our online community a couple times a week through Zoom meetings. You get more information on like the virtual support groups, all that type of stuff. So that's something, if you're interested in, please contact an agent. Either on the chat line or call in and someone will get you hooked up with that. Also too, thank you to the atheist community of Discord, where I am a facilitator. If you want to find me on there, it's Hell's Bells. Our wonderful friend Nikki is streaming it into the Discord. That's another great community to have wonderful conversations, not just on skepticism, but on random BS. Like sometimes we just talk about Doctor Who and other random crap that's going on. And then we have a bunch of events that go on there. So that's another online community that you can join. Also too, if, and I'm talking to you, really are a good, you are here and you want to do what me and Kara do and all the wonderful volunteers that are recovering from religion. If you want to be an agent, if you want to be a support group leader, if you want to do tech stuff, if you are good with online platforms, whatever you want to do and you want to join our community, please consider volunteering. We are always looking for volunteers. Our organization is 100% volunteer run and supported. So if you are interested in being part of our awesome community, you can hang out with me and I am super cool. You can hang out with Kara too, and they are super cool. You can hang out with all, you're cool. Your coolness is 20% better because you're friends with me. So,
that's true.
That is so.
And yours can be too if you
yours
volunteer.
Can be too. You can be 20% cooler if you join the Recovering from Religion volunteer team. So please consider going to the website and filling out an application. We would love to have you. I can say not only for myself, but a lot of the volunteers that I work with, that working for this organization has been a really wonderful, positive experience in our lives. That's why we are so passionate about it and we care about it so much. So please consider volunteering. Okay, so Kara, can you tell us the main reason why we're here?
Yeah, you thought you already heard the reason, but we're not done talking yet. I'll tell you about the format of the show. It's the same as it always is, but this might be your first time here, so I don't want to act like you already know. So what we do is we have a guest. Our super awesome and amazing guest is going to come on in just a second, and we're going to have a discussion for about an hour where we're going to talk about navigating difficult conversations. And then after that, we'll have about 20 minutes of time where we can do Q&A. And in order for us to be able to do Q&A, we have to have some questions. So if during the talk you realize you have a question that you'd like to ask, go ahead and type it into the chat and we'll be collecting those. And we may not get to them right on the spot at the moment you type it, but we'll be collecting them and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can at the end. So yeah, as Rob is mentioning in the chat, started out with the word question. So we know it's a question for the speaker, not just a rhetorical question or you're chatting with somebody else. Type question and then write your question and we'll gather those up. And then we'll do that and we'll have some closing thoughts from our fantastic and amazing president, Dr. Darrel Ray. And then we'll move on to the social hangout, which is where we turn off the recording and people can just chat and continue to ask questions and comment and have a good time hanging out because everybody here is fun and super cool. So that's what we're going to do. So what do you say we do that, Helen?
I say that we should. I think we should start.
I think we should too. I'm glad we're in agreement.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's do it. Okay, so let me introduce our fabulous guest in that case. Tonight we have Dr. Betty Iglesias Snyder, who is a trainer, coach, mediator, DEI consultant, and facilitator. She's got a really long resume. She teaches courses in communication, mediation, psychology of conflict, culture and gender, peace building, neuroscience. She served as director and faculty member of dispute resolution programs at multiple universities, not just one. She's provided a wide range of alternative dispute resolution and conflict management services with individuals, organizations, and communities. And she's also a published author, has been featured in 2 documentaries. So I am super excited to have you on. Betty, Dr. Snyder, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with such an amazing organization. Awesome people.
Thank you so much. We're so lucky to have you. I have been so excited about this. So our topic tonight is navigating difficult conversations, and you're something of an expert in that. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and how you got involved in that?
Yeah, I love my work. I get to do a little bit of everything. All things conflict is what I say. So I get to work with individuals, groups, and communities, both in the with the lens of preventing conflict, but also just diving right in when things are already messy. And I love to help people kind of navigate and get to a better place in conflict. So I have been really lucky to get to work all over the world and getting to work with all different kinds of folks. So I love it. I don't like my own conflict, just to put that out there. I like other people's conflict.
Is that like trying to cut your own hair?
Yeah, which I did not do well during the pandemic. By the way, that's a different podcast about how I accidentally gave myself a mullet. Yeah.
There was a lot of bad hair during the pandemic. So, you know,
it was
part of
the worst.
a pool of people that were just like, you know what, I can do my own hair. And then you do it and you're just like, it was bad choices.
Right? Yeah, I'm seeing a comment. They're back in style now, but 2 years ago, it was bad. It was bad.
you were ahead of it. You knew it was coming back.
You were psychic.
Brought it.
You're psychic.
We have a lot of psychics on here.
It was bad.
That's great. Yeah, I can relate to that. Well, okay. So before you were cutting hair, how did you get involved in dispute resolution?
I actually backed into this. I wasn't really intending on it. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I don't work individually with clients in that way anymore. What I started noticing, I was doing a lot of individual or couples therapy, family therapy, and a little bit of organizational psych, where I would go in and work with organizations. And I just really found a passion for helping people to really just kind of unpack their conflict, unpack what's going on, and help them to learn better ways and better methods of dealing with conflict. Because so much of what I was noticing stemmed from just complete miscommunication or stemmed from fear. And when people were able to learn skills, or when people were able to really just talk about what they needed, people were able to transform conversations and lead to such better outcomes. And so I realized that was needed, not just in the therapy office, which is a very important place to be, but that we need it like everywhere, like everywhere in this world, right? Like we needed goodness everywhere. And so I thought that I wanted to make a bigger impact by working with communities and organizations and empowering people with skills in different ways, and teaching as well. So that's kind of backed into it.
That's a lot of important stuff though there. I mean, those are, I feel like, so I took some courses in this as well, as you are well aware.
Yeah.
I always felt like, wow, how come we don't learn this in school? Like, why is this not part of the curriculum in, I don't know, middle school, elementary school?
What's so sad is, if you think about like, where did most of us learn how to engage in conflict? And I would venture to say that most of us did not have the most phenomenal examples of growing up in conflict in our family of origin. And so then where do we go to learn examples? In that school or religious institutions, where again, did not learn the best of all examples. High schools teach debate. I don't know, they don't teach peace building, right? And I think that we don't know what to do. We're a very, can be a very divisive society, and we learn how to negotiate. We learn how to stand up for ourselves. We learn how to fight. We learn how to fight back. But we don't know how to actually build peace and work things out. And it's not something we're born with. It's something that you have to learn. And so people often will come to one of my trainings or one of my coaching sessions and just be so ashamed. It's like, well, we didn't learn this anywhere. So now you get to learn it. So, and even when we learn it, we're still not perfect. I still lose it every once in a while. We all do.
Oh yeah. Like I know my default is conflict avoidant. Like I'm always like, I don't like confrontation. But when the times I had actually learned how to have constructive conversations on difficult topics and not saying I don't lose my shit every once in a while, because I'm a human being and you're going to lose your shit, but getting that bravery to have those difficult conversations, even though every single, your panic bottoms are going out. I'm like, nope. That's a really difficult thing to learn to overcome.
Yeah. And the courage to stay in the conversation can be really hard, because we don't like to deal with the ugly emotions that come up in a conversation. And so to sit with that takes a lot of courage, and it's yucky. It just feels yucky. So yeah.
Yes.
And I see some of the comments, somebody says, oh, Glenda, it takes a lifetime of practice. And it absolutely, it's a new skill. And with any new skill, you have to try it 100 times before it actually sticks in your brain. I like to use the metaphor of, a lot of us have probably potty trained a puppy or a child. And what do we do first is you catch the puppy. The puppy has no idea that it's, they weren't born knowing where to go to the bathroom, and you have to catch it, put it outside, and then good doggy, or whatever you do. And it takes so many times of catching the puppy doing what they're doing. And so part of learning these skills is to first become self-aware of what you're doing, catching yourself, not peeing, but doing whatever it is that you're doing, and then say, well, what else do I need to do? One of my favorite quotes by I believe it's Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a pause, and it's in that pause that allows us the opportunity or the space to do something different. I didn't quote it exactly, but along those lines. And so learning these skills is learning how to find that pause, because it often feels like we're going from 0 to 100, and that there is no pause when we're in conflict. So we can learn to be self-aware.
That is great advice. So also slow down, stop shouting for just a few minutes. And
yeah, but it feels so good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good after most of the time. So
yeah, that's true. So, thinking about that, I'm guessing that a lot of people in our audience tonight can probably remember a time when they have had a difficult conversation with a friend or a loved one that might have centered around something like having a different religious belief or values. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, what do you think makes those conversations so difficult? And do we need a special set of skills to be able to talk about those kinds of things?
So most of us absolutely need a special set of skills because they are really difficult to experience. And I bet just even when you said that, conversation centering around values or religious beliefs, I just felt my anxiety rise. So even I didn't have a specific conversation in mind. Most people find those conversations difficult. And when I ask people, when I'm doing a workshop or a coaching session, and I say, what is it that makes the conversation difficult, or what are you experiencing as difficult? Let's unpack it a little bit. And I'm getting common themes that people say, and everybody's is different in terms of what their trigger is, but a lot of people will say the emotion, either mine or yours, right? I can't handle or tolerate what emotions are coming up for me, or I can't tolerate the emotions coming up from other people. That's a huge one. And other people will say, well, I'm worried that it's going to jeopardize my relationship with this person. This person is important to me in my life. This is my dad. This is my mom. This is my partner, and I don't want to have this conversation because what if I lose the person? Or what if I hurt their feelings? The other one that is a trigger for most people is when there's values at stake, because values are something that you're not going to go into negotiation and walk out with having changed your value, right? So if you go in a conversation perceiving that the other person's trying to change that value, and vice versa, you're going to hold your stake in the ground deeper because you're not letting that value go. So if that's someone's perception, they're not going to have a part of that. The other one, which I think is one of the most overlooked ones, is that our basic human needs are violated during a difficult conversation, or they can be violated. And basic human needs can be, we often think of, food, water, safety, but those things, our brain perceives psychological safety as important as physical safety. And so if I'm threatened psychologically, or I don't feel psychologically safe, my brain is actually processing that as the same as a physical threat. And so psychological safety is an absolute human need. Dignity is a human need, right? And we're in conflict. I can tell you, in my ugliest moments where I have been very unkind in a conflict, I have violated other people's dignity. There's a book that will be shared with you in as a reference. It's by Donna Hicks, and it's about dignity. And basically, she talks about how the center of all conflicts has to do with violating people's dignity, or your dignity being violated, and we don't react well to that, right? I'm seeing a question about what if someone's value is that a certain group of human beings is inferior? That's a really great question. I actually know a person who negotiates. He is a mediator, has negotiated like a genocide, right? And in a genocide, it's not only are you inferior, but you're not a human, and then we have to kill and exterminate you, right? You can't negotiate that. But what he does, so I asked him, like, what do you do in that situation? And he says, you have to find a higher order of what is one thing that they both believe in, and what is one thing they both want to fight for. And what he found is everyone here is losing people they love to this genocide. Everyone here. So can we agree that we want to stop losing people we love? Yes. So what do we need to do? Right. So human rights, and I'm a big human rights advocate, is not something that I'm willing to negotiate, right? I'm not willing to negotiate that. But am I willing to negotiate a conversation around, safety? Right? Can we agree that we all need to be or feel safe, whether or not you think that that's important to them or not? And so you don't negotiate that value or your value, but you can find a higher value a lot of the times, not all of the time. But that's a really, really great question. Very important question, one that I struggle with. So the values is really important to people. And then the other one that I referenced earlier is fear. A lot of times people will not engage in a conversation because they're afraid. And what I tell people in those situations is ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then can I cope with that thing, right? Because I have a lot of people will take my training and they're like, I'm going to go quit my job. I'm going to go tell my boss how I feel. I'm like, wait, hold on. Do you need health insurance? Do you need your paycheck? Do you need, what's the likelihood that that's actually that you're going to get fired? Because if that is a likelihood, then are you okay with that? And some people are like, I don't care. I am leaving. I'm setting this boundary and I can afford it and I don't need this or whatever. That's fine, right? Or let's create a plan to get you, to a safe plan. So fear is the other thing that makes a conversation difficult. So yes, I think we definitely need skills to navigate those things.
Yes. Well, I am so glad you're here to share those with us, because yeah, I'm pretty sure I've probably experienced all of those things you just described.
Me too.
Yeah, I think I answered A and B on the poll earlier. What do you do? Avoid it like the plague and then explode.
Right.
I get when I feel threatened, I turn into like a bitchy, sarcastic person. That's the way my anger comes out. And like when I'm feeling that burning. And then when I get really angry, I angry cry. Like I'm yelling at someone why I'm crying, because I'm upset that I'm upset. Like you made me so mad that I'm crying. And then I feel really bad for reacting, and then I apologize, and then I cry some more, and then I turn to a weepy mess, and then I have a productive conversation. That's the MO, how Helen deals with the conflict.
Well, and yeah, that's a great point, Helen, and an excellent segue. I was going to ask too, what kinds of things could we expect to happen to us, whether it's emotionally or physiologically, when a really difficult or divisive issue comes up in a conversation?
Yeah. And I'm actually reading some great reactions in the chat of things that people have, which really illustrate that we have a broad range of reactions. And I think it's really, really useful to understand. I'm kind of a brain nerd, so I apologize, but I think it's really important to understand what is actually happening in our brain when we are in conflict or when we are triggered. And so I kind of think of it like, basically our brain is functioning as well as if you were really drunk. So now you have, if you have two people in conflict, you have two people that are really drunk. And I think we could probably all agree that that's not the best time or to have a conflict. So just kind of a really, really short, what happens to your brain. If you could just think for just a second of the last conflict that you had, that say you were like a level 7 or 8 in terms of like emotional trigger. And if you just kind of ask yourself, like, what was going on with my body? Like, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was going on? Basically, what happens is the second we get triggered, and obviously it depends on how heavy the trigger is, right? Like if it's something that bothers you a little bit, you're going to be way more in control if you had half a glass of wine as opposed to a bottle of wine, right? And so let's say you're triggered at like a 6 or a 7. One of the first things that happen is you have like all of these stress hormones that just flood your bloodstream. So even if you resolve the conflict, you wake up the next morning and you feel like emotionally hungover. Part of it is because you still have these chemicals in your body. So you have all of these, and then you have an activation of part of your nervous system that is telling you fight or flight. So your body is literally reacting like you're being chased by a tiger. Your body does not know the difference. We're not that evolved, unfortunately, to know the difference between being chased by a tiger and getting in a difficult conversation. Some people are saying they shake. Some people are saying they freeze. They start crying. A lot of those reactions might happen. And basically, the fight or flight reaction, fight, flight, or freeze, is basically all of the things you need to deal with getting chased by a tiger. And that's your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases. Your body's getting ready to either run faster or hide. And all those things are really adaptive if you're like fighting in the war, right? But a conflict isn't. And so it takes a while for the other part of our nervous system, called the parasympathetic nervous system, that's like the paramedics, to come in and be like, you need to chill. This is not a tiger. This is your friend, or this is whatever news station. That's what's happening right now, right? And so your parasympathetic nervous system takes a while to slow you down, but we get stuck in the hijack place. And when we're in that space, we start with the all or nothing thinking. We start with the us versus them thinking. We have intense bouts of anger. The part of our brain that we actually need to calm ourselves down is literally like turned off and deactivated. So the part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that has the ability to have empathy, organization, non-emotional decision making, all of those things that we really need in a conflict, problem solving, de-escalation, collaboration, is just completely disengaged. So you're the opposite. You're I'm going to quit. I want a divorce. Saying things that you can never take back. All of those things are your aggression, your adrenaline, all of those things are activated. And so we really want to trick the brain to get to a place where our paramedics are more of a place where we're functioning from, and that we can turn on the part of our brain that we need to get us through.
Wow. Yeah,
that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I think a lot of people are sort of reacting to that in the chat too, and a lot of conversations going on in there as well. Yeah, I agree with that. And I was just thinking, while you were talking about that too, about how we do have that tendency to, our brain kind of goes, into fight or flight or whatever, even though we're talking to someone that's a friend or a family member, or, our boss at work that we really need to maintain that relationship with. And, lately, especially for those of us in the US, a lot of our disagreements have kind of sort of morphed into, well, it's a religious value, and now we're having this polarized political argument about it where people are really dug in. And what should we do when we get into these conversations, and maybe we're at work or we're having a nice family dinner, and all of a sudden somebody starts bringing up religion and sex and politics all mixed up into the same issue, and we get completely hijacked in our brain, like, what do we do?
Yeah. One of the things that we really have to ask ourselves is like, do I want to avoid or do I want to confront? Right? Like what and what, how important is the relationship as opposed to how important is your agenda, right? Your agenda of saying whatever it is that you need to say. And if you're sitting with your family and you don't want to ruin everybody's dinner and everybody's like, oh my God, you know, and everybody's got that uncle, whoever, who's like poking you, you know, we all have like the one person in our family. You really want to just make a decision on whether or not you want to avoid or confront now, or maybe you want to have a conversation later. So that's a decision that needs to be made. In the workplace, you could get fired. You could, you know, so what's the appropriate space and place and emotional state you need to be in to have this conversation? And so those are decisions that are hard to make when you're at the heat of emotion. And so it's better, we all know that we're triggered by these conversations right now, to plan ahead of time and say, okay, if so-and-so brings this up in the break room, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? What am I going to handle it? How am I going to handle it? So preparing for these conversations and what might happen is really important.
Okay, so you're planning ahead while those parts of your brain are still working.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's like when if you practice mindfulness, to know what's happening within your body, because I think when we're engaged in really difficult conversations, it can be very hard to recognize the tension that you're feeling, the anger that you're feeling, that slow creep of the threat. And if you're not in tune with it, all of a sudden you're at like a 2, and then all of a sudden somebody says like 1 or 2 more things, and then suddenly you're at a 10. And recognizing how you're being triggered and the response that it's happening with your body, it can make a huge difference on how things are going to go.
That is huge. Yes. And also someone mentioned, I'm really glad, an exit strategy. We don't always have to stay in a difficult conversation. If you feel like your boundaries are being violated, if you feel like you're going to, somebody might trigger you because they know you're going to lose it, and then you're going to get a consequence for that, or they want to make you look bad. And so it's okay to set a boundary, decide what that boundary is going to be. And if you do need to exit, then that's absolutely okay. And that's in part of the planning, and part of the avoid or confront. Avoid might be avoiding the conversation, and it might be avoiding the table and leaving, or it might be deciding that I'm not going home for whatever this holiday is because it's too toxic for me. And that's okay too.
Excellent. Okay. So let's say you do decide to engage for whatever reason. Are there some kind of steps or general guidelines for dealing with these kind of divisive issues if you are going to have the conversation? Yeah,
definitely. And there's a couple of like different models that you can use. I like to have like a cheat sheet, you know, or something. These aren't all going to work in all situations. And one of the things I tell people is like, you're learning all these skills. Don't assume the other person knows them or has them, right? We get all excited, like, I know how to do this conversation. And then we get super disappointed the other person's not following the same script.
Yeah.
So we have to realize that just because we have a skill doesn't mean the other person is. And so it won't always go okay or go well, but just kind of some general things is always, and this isn't necessarily a dinner table thing, but just any difficult conversation, is figure out like, what is your intention for saying or doing what you're going to say, right? Like we might have like somebody just really pissed us off, and I'm like, I'm going to go and tell them how I feel and whatever. You want to ask yourself, like, what is my intention? Because that should set your kind of what the next thing's going to happen, right? If my intention is to just let someone have it, then that's just what it is. And then you let them have it. And then you have to decide if that's okay, or if that's fits with your integrity, or, you know, or whatever. But if your intention is to make things better and you want to have a productive conversation, that's hopefully going to make things a little better, then there's a couple of things that I would ask yourself. Is really try to prepare for the conversation. And you can role play it with someone, you can talk through it, you can write it down. The more times your brain has experience of having this conversation successfully, the less anxious you're going to feel going into it. And so really try to think about like, what might my triggers be and how am I going to handle them? Like, how might this person react to what I'm going to say? But the hardest thing I'm going to tell you is the hardest thing to do, and especially if we're not using the right part of our brain, but I'll tell you how to trick our brain, is listen first. I'm gonna let that soak in for a second. And
Wait,
I mean,
I
like,
wasn't listening.
Really? I know. And I mean, like, really listen, like, and your brain can't be curious and furious at the same time. It doesn't work like that. So you can shortcut the furious by being curious. So one of the things that I do, because what we do is we automatically kind of like jump to like, well, that was stupid, or that person's stupid, or that person is a whatever, or whatever. Switch that to asking yourself, like, what could it be about this person's like upbringing, life, you know, where they grew up, what messages they were given, where they were born, what, you know, whatever it is that can lead them to believe what they believe right now. Like, just out of curiosity, right? But really truly listen and ask questions about their perspective and their opinion. And when they feel heard, and not until they feel heard, are they going to actually listen to you, because their brain is furious, right? You want them to hear you. And if you want them to hear you, you have to hear them first. So you can do that by just showing, there's all kinds of things you can read on like active listening, by just asking questions, and not questions like, well, why do you think that? Because that's stupid. But genuinely like, can you help me understand a little bit more about X, Y, or Z? How did this impact you? And then when they tell you, it's good to sometimes just kind of summarize. So it sounds like what you're saying is you think that people, you know, not all people get to have healthcare, only certain kind of people. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? You know, giving them nods, making them feel heard, thinking about how you need to feel heard and what that might look like to you, letting them feel heard, whether you agree or disagree, irrelevant at that moment. Just have the conversation, let them feel heard. After they feel heard and you kind of parroted back to them what they said, is then you can share your perspective. And one of the keys to this is you want to try to have this conversation with as little judgment as possible in your words and what you're saying. So try to come from a place of being non-judgmental. I'm getting a lot, it's hard to do when their perspective is egregious. Absolutely, 100% agree. And that kind of depends on, or if someone's being rude to you, on why do I need to be in this conversation? Do I need to be in it? And what's the purpose, right? You don't always have to stay in the conversation. But if you have to be in the conversation, it's good to have the skills to be able to have these conversations. If you have an agenda, if you have a reason you need to be in this conversation, if it's with your boss and you have to get through, there are conversations that it's difficult to get out or back out of. So these are all skills and strategies that are helpful, you know, in those situations. There is also, to try to shortcut and to get to the front part of your brain, is you want to try as hard as you can to try to take their perspective by asking yourself like questions like I said about like what their upbringing, but just say, if I was that person, what might I be thinking or feeling? And if I'm thinking or feeling that, then what I might need to hear right now to make this a more productive conversation. So remember, if your goal is to have a productive conversation, these are the strategies that you use. If your goal is to close the conversation, to walk away, or to just be ugly, or, you know, whatever, those are different pathways. There is a strategy that I'll tell you just really quick. It's a model. It's called nonviolent communication. And the last name of the person who created this model is Rosenberg. And he wrote a book. And basically there's 4 principles to this. And I encourage you to just try this, and try it in a situation where you care about the relationship. not where somebody's being a complete, you know what, to you and demeaning human lives. Like that's just not. But if this is somebody like you're in a relationship, you care about this, you're in a nasty conflict, try these steps. So the first step is, this is trying to be non-judgmental, trying to shift away from the non-judgmental and non-accusatory. Because as soon as anybody accuses us of anything, we shut down. We're done, closed, not listening, right? So if you really want them to hear what your needs are, this strategy is really useful. So you want to first observe the situation. So for example, you might say, I notice that whenever we sit down at the table with your friends, you bring up issues that are difficult for me to talk about, like religion. Okay, so notice that was it. I noticed that when you write, you're just stating the facts. If you were a neutral, observer stating the facts, that's the step one. The second one is identify the feelings that are coming from the situation. So every time that this happens, it makes me feel really powerless, and it makes me feel scared that I'm going to blow up and not be able to navigate this conversation. Okay, again, there's no judgment, no accusation. The third thing is identify the needs to be met. So I have to unpack that for myself and say, what is my need? And I think if that were the situation, my need would be, probably feel to be respected, that this is not a conversation I'm wanting to have, right? Or respected, maybe my boundaries or limits, because we've talked about this before, right? Mm-hmm. So then I would say, and what I'm needing from you in those moments is that you please not bring up those conversations. That's what I'm needing. So you're bringing, this is what I need, right? And then you're expressing a clear request. That's number 4, that will make my life better, right? And so what I'm requesting is that when we all get together as a group, or at the table or whatever, that we not talk about religion. Right. So those are 4 steps. And I seriously have people that I coach that put them on a note card, and you can use this with a boss, with anybody. So basically you are serving this up in a platter that is easier for them to listen to. And now you're giving them a request instead of just kind of berating them with everything they've done wrong, right? Which they'll just shut down. I want to just stop. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like how you mentioned too, again, that like the need might be to not be having this conversation all the time. Like that's a valid thing to want out of the interaction, is for it to stop happening, basically.
Yeah.
I also kind of want to piggyback off of what you said. Like, I think also, how would you feel about knowing the degree of the relationship you have with the person? Like if it's a close family member, that might cause more conflict than it would with a coworker, depending on your emotional closeness with the person, and kind of recognizing that and how these strategies are going to work.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be guided by the relationship and what you're comfortable sharing, right? So my boss, I might not say, it makes me feel like a little girl inside. Like I would probably not say that, but I would say something like, it makes me feel like my authority is being questioned in front of my people that report to me, right? Like, so what I would like to request is that when you have issues or concerns, that you please bring them up, on a one-on-one basis or something. So you definitely have to keep in mind what the relationship is and kind of adjust your message to that. I see one of the questions, and this is a great illustration. What if in your attempt to understand the other person, they refuse to explain themselves, outright yell that they already know and tell you to stop acting stupid? That tells me that that's not going to be a productive conversation, right? Because they're not de-escalated. They're in their trigger space. And so what I would say to that, and you're being treated like crap in the process, that's not okay, right? So I would say something along the lines of, it sounds like you're really not in a place to engage in a productive conversation right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and do blah, 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 blah. Let me know when you're ready to have a conversation where we can both feel respected. Right. So you're still kind of saying, I'm observing, right? I'm observing that this isn't a good time to have this conversation. It's not feeling productive for me. And so what I want to ask is that we're going to do this later. And you're going to then take a step to take care of yourself. Sometimes they'll de-escalate at that moment and say, okay, you're right. I'm not, because they'll want to stay in the conversation. And you can just say, you know, in order to stay in the conversation, what I'm needing is for us to not be name calling and really trying to understand each other. And I'm just not feeling that right now. So I'm going to back away, but just let me know, because it sounds like this is an important issue to you because you keep bringing it up. So let me know when you're ready to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you expect in a situation like that, would you maybe have to do that multiple times before the person quits acting in that same way? Like if it's the situation that was described, where they're just like getting angry and yelling at you every time, like could it work even if you come back to the conversation later and they say, oh, okay, I won't yell at you this time, and then they get triggered again and they do it again? Like, do you just keep, saying, no, we're not going to do this now, let's do it later?
It's important to have like what I call like meta conversations, like conversations about how you have conversations, right? So when you're not in conflict, is you talk about how are we going to handle these conversations, right? And then kind of create some guidelines that both of you agree on. And then when people aren't meeting those guidelines, you already have like a plan. So what do I do if I just lose my shit and I can't follow these rules? What's going to be the plan? And then you kind of have a plan together. Like, this is the safety word, or this is the, and then there's an agreement, right? So that's optimal. And somebody says if they're like this every time, at some point, you need to decide if this is a relationship that's good for you, and that is able to be in a relationship that you deserve, which is one where your dignity is honored, and that your needs are important.
Like recognizing boundaries and what I was okay and not okay in any relationship. Like when me and my husband have conflict and our emotions are rising to a surface that the conversation is not going to be productive, and we might say things to each other that we're going to regret. It's like, I need to go have tea with this, which means I need to go sit down with my demons and deal with these feelings, and then we can have a productive conversation. So I think that's part of it too, is recognizing what your limits are to have a productive conversation. And if someone's not respecting your limits and what is okay and insulting you, you have to decide, is it worth getting into that conflict with them? Because if they're not going to respect your boundaries,
that triggers you.
And it's going to be an exercise in frustration.
Yes, absolutely. Because then if somebody's not respecting my boundaries personally, I'm going to not feel psychologically safe. Then I can't have that conversation. Right. So that, very, very important point. And that also made me think about how important it is. Like, we all blow up, right? We can follow the script. We can do everything. How important it is to repair when we do blow up in relationships that matter. And the quicker we can repair something and say, I'm sorry, and acknowledge what we've done. And not, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry I blew up. I know we had this agreement. Here's what I'm going to do to try to work on it. And the sooner that we can do that repair, the better it is for the relationship. And that's in all situations.
You're saying, I'm sorry you felt that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry you thought I blew up at you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're feeling sad. I'm sorry. I just got triggered.
Right.
I'm sorry you misunderstood our comments.
Right.
I'm sorry you don't like it when I yell.
Yeah.
You only yelled, I'm sorry that I yelled, but you made me yell. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's unpleasant. Yeah. Unpleasant.
Yeah. So a real apology, not a I'm sorry you were wrong apology.
Absolutely. Right.
Key difference there.
Yes, definitely. Faux apologies. Somebody said. I'm going to borrow that. I love
apologies. It. I'm using that now. Thank you.
Oh, me too. I love it.
feel like we could have a whole episode of examples of
The
faux
faux
apologies.
apologies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so aside from avoiding the faux apologies, what are some of the steps that we can take? Let's say we get to that point, we figure out our meta rules for the conversation, here's how I'm going to know if it's time for me to step away. Where do we start?
At what point? Where are you? Remind me,
Like,
where are we in the conversation?
no, like we've decided we're going to talk, we're
Okay.
expressing our needs, we've listened, we've heard the other person, and we still have a fundamental disagreement, about, who gets
Yes.
healthcare, or so how do we work with that? We still
Yeah.
don't have the same fundamental belief, but we
Yeah.
still want to have the relationship, and we still want to fix whatever the issue is. Where do we begin?
So one thing is to what we call interest-based negotiation is I use the word interest and need synonymously, is try to find out what's important to that other person and what's important to you, and then how can you find, is there common ground? And I can give you an example of, a lot of times we think there is no common ground at all, and sometimes there's not. And then you have to make decisions. But a lot of times there are things that are common ground. And I can tell you, I facilitated some very difficult dialogues. And one was around the issue of abortion. And we all know that these are very difficult conversations because there's not a whole lot of like a middle ground, right? And so people are coming in this conversation going, what are we doing? Like, why are we talking, right? And so what I did was I facilitated a dialogue where they actually had to listen. And what they did, my question was, what is at the heart of this matter for you? And that's getting to the need or the interest, right? And so all of this, and they weren't allowed to crosstalk at first, they were later, but one of them would share a story about, one person said, when I was a child, or they all gave different stories, right, from different perspectives, and how abortion had impacted them, different levels. Obviously, some people were pro, some people were not. And so it was, but what's all of a sudden started happening through these stories were that all of a sudden it wasn't about the murderer and the person who's trying to take all my rights away. It was about like, oh my, these are all humans. Like, all these people actually have stories that are impacting me emotionally, and I haven't changed my mind, right? I'm not going to vote differently, but now all of a sudden, Kara's a person, Helen's a person, which is huge. And once we're all human beings, we can find something that we agree on. And so what they ended up agreeing on, which was absolutely amazing. So they all told their stories. They go through several rounds, and then they're allowed to ask questions and then crosstalk. They were all able to realize that no one there actually liked abortion. Like, nobody was like, that's a great thing, and I think that, this is just the greatest thing ever. They all agreed that, wouldn't it be ideal if the need for abortion, like people not getting raped, unwanted pregnancy, all these, wouldn't it be great if that could be prevented? All of them decided that. They have formed a working group. They've been working together for 3 years, working to find ways to prevent the need. So like, some of them are doing like rape education. Some of them are like trying to advocate for like, how do we get, and there's some minor disagreements amongst them, but they're working kind of together on like, how do we get like Plan B in high school vending machines in certain areas, and like just all kinds of things that they've been able to come up with. And so like, they found common ground, and they're able to use that energy to actually bring change, instead of like, holding traumatic pictures up and making everybody look at them, and just different ways that are actually more effective than what they were doing individually. So finding out what's important to people and what's at the root of the issue is really important. And so if we can shift our focus to, instead of right or wrong, instead of us versus them, if we can find a we in there somewhere, right? We don't like this, or we think this, then people are much more likely to hold a space for human beings that they can work with together.
Wow. That is really
Yeah.
incredible. Like these were people that were actually on like staunchly opposite sides of this polarized debate, and they were able to figure out a way to actually work together on things that was meeting a goal that they shared. That's kind of incredible after, some conversations I've had with family members and things. It's encouraging that happened.
Yeah, it is.
Like earlier, like last week, I was arguing with actually a friend of mine on Facebook that has very different views than mine. And they became a symbol to me of all the things that I'm actively fighting against and stuff like that. Instead of seeing them as a person, I saw them as a symbol of all the frustration that I'm feeling and stuff like that. And she kind of called me out on it. And I was just like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I've been kind of a bitch. And I kind of forgot that you're a human being with feelings and opinions. And even though we don't agree on things, I actually know that you're a really decent, kind person. And you just have very different beliefs than I do. And I haven't been a good friend, and I am sorry. And she called me out, and I felt terrible because I'm triggered by all this shit that's going on. And instead of remembering that this is a human being, she became a symbol of all the anger and frustration I was feeling. And that is not healthy to do. I'm going to tell you all right now, don't do that. The people that you're symbolize all the anger, frustration that you're feeling because their views are different than yours, they're still people. And to you represent all the anger and frustration about the opposite end for them. So, and remembering that is difficult, but it's nice to get a wake-up call and be humbled. I will say that.
Absolutely. That was a very powerful example, Helen. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is my therapy.
Yeah.
So I come here once a week and I get therapy.
This is what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the check's in the mail. It's not.
Exactly. I'll give you all that atheist money. Here you go.
Yeah, there's not a lot of it. But no, that's so encouraging. Yeah, I'm already like feeling encouraged just from the conversation, which is great.
Yeah, Betty, this is wonderful. You're giving such really good advice and very practical ideas, even though it's hard. This is all skills that we can all adopt to be better people. So it's deeply appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is hard. It's hard stuff.
Yes, it is.
But I've seen some amazing stuff.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's so encouraging. That, and I mean, you've been in it. You've been involved in, some of the most protracted, polarizing, traumatic conflicts, it sounds like, and there was still progress to be made. That gives me hope that maybe, my aunts and uncles from Facebook, maybe we can have a conversation.
I don't know, Kara, but
yeah, some of them I'm not sure.
You can have a conversation. Yes, you definitely can have a conversation.
It might not fit in the healthy relationship to continue category, but there's a chance.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's good to know. So what about, like, I know earlier you were talking about, when we have these conversations, we might be experiencing these emotions and feeling triggered and hijacked in our brains and things like that. And so we plan ahead for what we're going to do, but do you have any tips for, how to kind of regulate our emotions, during the conversation, so that we are taking care of our own emotional state and also, having the productive conversation? Like, are those things necessarily always, in conflict? Can we do both at the same time, take care of ourselves and have the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. It's hard. Emotional regulation's hard. And the first thing I had said is self-awareness, right? So first you have to catch yourself in the moment. And then some of these other, I'm going to kind of just rattle off a list. And some of these might sound really weird, but it's basically, how do you get in this part of your brain when you're hijacked? Because this is the one you need, right? And so there's some things that are like, and this is even just when you're scared, just when you're anxious. I did this on the plane when there's turbulence, is like count backwards from 100 by 7. you will notice that the more upset or anxious you are, the harder that's going to be. Then do it by 2. I've had to do it by 1. Okay, I can't do 5. I can't do 4. It just keep going. You know, count by 2s, or, you know, whatever, that you're just doing it. It honestly works. Like, it gets you to a different place. You just have to make yourself do it. I made myself read a magazine. This is all airplane stuff, like every other word. Just like read every other word of this magazine, and it just gets your brain. Writing lists accesses the frontal lobe of your brain. And not a list of like why I hate this person or why I'm mad, but like a list of, like, someone said, I love writing lists. Awesome. Like what you need to do at work tomorrow, or what you need to get for your grocery shopping, or, you know, whatever lists that you might come up with. But others are, you know, I want to ask you all, most people are pretty resilient, and you all have your own strategies. Like, what has helped you in the past? Sometimes it's self-talk. If you can name it, you can tame it. Another colleague of mine said that. So what are you feeling? Like, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm resentful, I'm, you know, whatever. But also, what has worked for you to de-escalate in the past? And sometimes it's challenging yourself. Like, sometimes I'll tell myself, like, okay, sometimes when you're in conflict, Betty, you think that it's the end of the world. Like, I literally like feel like I'm gonna die if my husband's mad at me, you know? And it's like, okay, I've felt like this before, and 100% of the times that we've gotten in arguments, I don't feel like that tomorrow, right? I might still be upset, but I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. So, like, what kind of mantras do you need to tell yourself? Music, somebody just brought up, that was my next thing. Have a happy playlist, not a, like, there are some songs that just do not make you feel good, right? Not those, right? What's your happy playlist? And your brain immediately will shortcut. Like, one of mine's like Bob Marley, like the 3 Little Birds, you know, like, what are some, Mr. Jones, you know, like, what are some of the ones that just kind of make you, so put that list on, gets you in a different part of your brain. It doesn't mean the conflict's going to go away, but you're not going to be like irrational and feel like it's the end of the world with that. A lot of people say exercise is really helpful. Go out, take a walk, take a run. I have a friend that if you have a friend that helps you de-escalate. So I have a friend that's like my frontal lobe. I have some friends that'll like egg it on and make it worse, right? But who's your friend that's going to be like, well, what was that person's perspective? You know, what do you think? So who is your friend that can help you get to the rational place? And I have a friend that I literally call him, like, I need my frontal lobe. Are you available? You know, help talk me off this ledge. And I do the same thing for her. And it really helps. We're learning all kinds of words, and accountability.
Yeah,
I love it. Yes,
I love
absolutely.
that.
I am a woman yellow cloud person. Like, I will drive in my car to work or from work, and if I'm mad at someone, I get out what I really want to say, so I can just get it out of my system, even though I won't go to their face and be like, you're acting like a fucking asshole, and blah blah blah. Like, I'm not going to do that, but at least, like, it gets that initial anger out, and then I'm like, okay, now maybe I can have a constructive conversation.
Absolutely. Like a purge. Yeah, purge somehow.
A purge gel. Like,
absolutely. Meditation can be very helpful for people. There's some guided meditations that are on YouTube, but also just deep breathing, because when we are anxious, we end up like breathing from our chest and not our diaphragm. And it short circuits our oxygen to the brain, which is a problem, because then your brain's freaking out. Then it's contributing to the whole fight or flight. So breathing diaphragmatically, taking like really deep breaths, and you have to take in as deep of a breath out. And so the bad stuff, the carbon dioxide or whatever, is what we exhale. So you don't want to just be inhaling and then not getting all that stuff out. And so that helps your brain to calm down a little bit as well. So, you know, and just ask yourself, like, what are things that have helped me calm down in the past? For some people, it's a blanket. For some people, it's a room in their house or in their car. What's going to make you feel psychologically safe? What do you need to do to self-soothe to get in a different space, a different environment? Deep breathing is something you can do at the dinner table with other people there. or thinking counting backwards from 100 or whatever. There are things that you can do when you can't escape the situation. So those are just some ideas.
Yeah.
Name it and then tame it.
Name it and tame it. I love that. And I definitely used your count back from 100 by 7 for plane turbulence. And I mean, it was weird. I didn't think it was going to work. And by the time I got to 54, which I don't think was the correct number that I should have arrived at according to multiples of 7, but that was where I was. And I realized I had completely forgot about being worried about the plane turbulence. I was just really trying to figure out if I'd subtracted the right number. And I mean, but I felt, completely different. Like the panic part was subsiding, and I was actually just thinking about math, which is really boring, which is,
right. It's a different space. Yeah. A couple of folks are saying that they play video games. If that helps you, absolutely. I mean, think about it's just a different place in your brain. You have to be logical. You have to be organized. You have to be strategic. That's getting the part of your brain that you need.
Yeah. That was it. It almost seemed too easy. Like it shouldn't have worked that well.
I know.
So my brain might be particularly easy to trick. I don't know. But it was great. Well, I love that. I love those strategies. Those are so useful, and they're things we can all do. Like you said, it could be at the dinner table or whatever. That's great. I'm taking notes right now. And of course, I'm going to come back and watch this later. But well, so we've kind of talked a little bit about, having an intention for the conversation, like knowing going into it, what we want to happen. How do you know when you're done or you've accomplished the conversation? Is there a good time to kind of decide, okay, we've made progress?
Know when you won. Then you declare it. I win.
Right. It's when they go, you're completely right. Everything I thought before was wrong and I'm an idiot, right?
Right. And then you get to pat yourself on the back and go, I am so smart. I
win.
And I'm sorry you didn't realize that sooner.
I know.
Oh, that's a great question, Kara. And that's a question like I ask people, like, how do you know you're done? Because the interesting thing is sometimes one person, the conversation's done, and sometimes the other isn't, right?
Yeah.
So done can mean like I'm done, I'm setting a boundary, I'm coming back to it, right? And that's if you just feel like you are not feeling psychologically safe, or you're feeling like this is not productive, right? This is actually against the goal of mine, and so that's one thing. But in terms of like I'm done, sometimes different people feel like progress looks different. For some people, it's like, have I moved forward at all? Right? Are we not killing each other anymore? Are we not yelling? Are we not degrading people? Have we made some progress? For me, it's, do people feel heard? Mm-hmm. Even though we don't agree, do people feel heard? Have you found any common ground? And are people honoring other people's dignity? Have I understood something that I didn't understand before? Have I learned something about my coworker, partner, friend, Facebook friend that I haven't talked to since 2nd grade? Has there been something new, that I've learned? And to me, like that would be progress. So how are you measuring progress? So it's either, are we making progress, or are we taking a pause, or are we deciding that this is not a conversation that needs to be had anymore? Because some conversations just don't ever need to be had.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to kind of decide what that is. With respect to setting your intentions, a friend of mine, his name is Larry Dressler, and he wrote the book Standing in the Fire, which is an amazing book. He talks about setting an intention as an individual for how you want to deal with all conflicts. And so, and it's something that you can use to prepare, and it's something that you can check yourself on your way out. And so I have a friend of mine, and I stole her intention. Her name is Robin Short, and so I'm giving her, this is her intention. Hers is, and this certainly does not apply to all conversations. This is a relationship preserving one. And even with coworkers, like I want to know that how I communicated was both true and kind. Because I think that we can be truthful and just be really nasty and hurt people's dignity. Like, let me tell you exactly how I think you look in that outfit, right? Or we can be kind, but not tell the truth. You look phenomenal in that outfit. When in reality, I know that they would not want to look that way or whatever, right? And so if I prepare for a difficult, like I've had to lay people off before, right?
Yeah.
You can definitely do that in a way that violates people's dignity, right? So how can I be true and kind? That's how I want to be in, in most conversations. And some of them, honestly, I don't care, right? Some of them, right? Where I feel like somebody's being violated or there's an injustice or there's certain things that's not my first goal, right? And so going into the conversation is like, how do I need to prepare for this so that I can walk away feeling that that's what happened? And then once I walk away from the conversation, I ask myself, was I true and kind? And if I wasn't, then what do I need to do to go back and repair? Right. Someone's asking what would be the best beginner book for someone wanting to learn how to handle difficult conversations. There's one that's called difficult. Let's see, I put it in it's called Difficult Conversations by Stone, Patton, and Heen. And that's a really good one that I would recommend. And it gives you kind of like a little formula. Another one that would be a really good beginner one is Nonviolent Communication by Rosenberg. And that one was also put in. Donna Hicks' book on dignity. It's called Dignity, Its Essential Role in Resolving Conflict. That's a great beginner one. And if you don't want to read her whole book, she has a TED Talk that's about 15 minutes and it's amazing. Like it's absolutely amazing. And so you could do that as well.
I love it when people make TED Talks of their books. It is the most convenient
It's
thing.
I'm not a reader. I'm a video watcher. Like I want someone to tell me what to do. That means because I have ADHD. I just can't concentrate for long periods of time. So I'm like, give me short snippets to make me a better person. That's what I want.
Yeah. Absolutely right. I need some strategy. Yeah.
Right. How can I apply this? Great.
Yes. Go do it. Yeah, and remember it takes practice. But yeah, those are some books.
Yeah.
Find one that like you read the back or whatever, and you're like that sounds great. These are books that are like should be like interesting to you because conflict is it's interesting, to dissect it from a lens of you're not in it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good place to start from when you're looking at the conflict a little bit more objectively. Like when you're triggered, it's not healthy because you're just like, well, this person's a butthead and, you can't engage in like a healthy conversation. But when you're removed from it and you can actually look at it, go, well, what is the goal? What relationship do I want to have with the person? Do they have to agree with me for us to get along? And asking those questions and kind of dissecting it that way, then just to rely, like your emotional triggers gets triggered and like, well, if they just agreed with me, then we would get along fine, and kind of breaking it down that way and learning to come to even a agree to disagree, place is better than, just yelling at each other and, and having constant conflict. Because who wants that? Like, I don't want constant conflict. I got enough stress in my life. Do I want to get into fights with people all the time? Fucking no. Don't have the energy. I'm 45 years old. Do I want to get in constant arguments with people? No. I'd rather drink wine and hang out and have pleasant conversations with people. That's why I hang out here.
Yes. Come here more. Have less conflict.
Sometimes agreeing to disagree is honoring people's dignity because that's saying you have a right to think your own thought. Like imagine that.
Yeah.
Right. We don't actually have to think the exact same way, and that's okay.
Everybody should think the way that I do.
It's not always okay. Sometimes it's a deal breaker, right? And I'm thinking like human rights issue. There's some certain decisions that you might make. I don't want to be in a relationship with a person who believes X, Y, or Z, right? But there are certain things that we're not always going to see the same way, and that's okay.
Right. We can still be friends if you like pineapple on pizza. Let's
not get carried away.
Well,
Listen, you're going to open a whole can of worms with that, Cara. You better watch out.
I've gone too far. Yeah.
I was going to say the line was bigots, but apparently
I don't even want it on your half
bigot
of
is
the
a
pizza.
line, but like pineapple on pizza, back the fuck up.
Not allowed. If you like that, there's something wrong with you fundamentally.
I'm judging you. I'm totally judging you.
I actually, okay, confession time. I actually do like pineapple on pizza. I'm seeing Team Pineapple in the chat, and I have to confess, like I do eat pineapple on my pizza.
Okay,
Yeah,
Cara,
I have to go now.
How would you find
I love
the middle
you,
ground?
but you're wrong.
So how would you find the middle ground? I would find a middle ground by honoring Cara. I understand that this is important to you. And how about you get just because I don't like pineapple on my pizza, but I don't want my pizza to touch your pizza. So we're going to have separate pizzas, and that's going to be okay.
Is it okay if I eat my pizza in the same room, or does there have
yes,
to be like
I just don't want your pineapple to touch my pizza.
I'm okay with that because I want to eat the
room.
pineapple, so it's okay with me if it doesn't touch your pizza. It can just touch mine.
You can eat the pizza. I will silently judge you, but I will not. But you can eat your pizza and love it, and I will still love you. But I'm still going to silently judge you.
Absolutely, and I might leave that part out.
Okay, but I'm being honest. I'm honoring my truth.
You're honoring yourself.
I'm honoring my truth.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. I love it. So good scenario, y'all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
leave out the part about silently judging. Just accept the person.
Right.
Just accept the person for who they are, and they like pineapple on pizza. They're wrong, but you can love them.
Okay. I still feel validated.
That's right. I will always validate you, Cara.
Thank you.
I want the common good is I genuinely want you to be happy with your dinner and enjoy your pizza. Like that's important.
Yeah.
I like you. I don't want you to have crappy pizza that you don't like. So
yeah.
Do you want to deal with someone that they're crangry? No.
Crangry. Yeah, my pizza kink is not your pizza kink, but it's
exactly.
Okay,
like don't dump anybody's yum, y'all.
And I agree with you. Someone's saying just as long as what a person believes isn't forced on others. And that is so true, because if Cara was trying to say, no, it's good, right?
Yeah.
Pineapple on your pizza is good. Like there's no debating. It is good, right? That's when it's like, you're actually now you're infringing on my beliefs. You're trying to force me to, and that doesn't go well, right? Then you get all kinds of things triggered.
Yeah, I ordered a pineapple pizza for your house because I decided you hadn't tried it. You didn't give it a chance yet. You need to. So I'm putting pineapple on your pizza from now on. That would
Excellent.
be crossing
I will
a
leave
line,
it
right?
here, waiting for you. Yeah. I'll hold it in a special place.
A special place. A
Hold
round cylindrical kind of place with a bag in it, maybe.
And her freezer for you to warm up later.
I'm okay with that. I love that. We've made such progress, y'all. No, that was great. Well, okay. Let me see. Where are we? It looks like we've actually covered a lot of the topics that we were planning to talk about. This has been great, actually. What else have we missed? Are there some more things, insights, tips, or tricks you'd like to leave us with before we start wrapping up and asking questions?
I think what just kind of came to my mind when you said that is something that somebody said at the beginning about stories and sharing stories being healing. I think you used the word. I think it was healing. And you also said listening with non-judgment, that those were all like services that you all do or you pride yourselves in. And so I want to kind of wrap in that is the importance of listening with non-judgment and how hard it is to do, and the healing and transformative power of stories, which is talking from your story, because no one can disarm your story. Nobody can tell you that your story is not your story. Right. And so really trying to listen for other people's story and other people's experience and perspectives, but also sharing your experience as yours, not as right or wrong, right? It's my story. So I think those are the two kind of things that I wanted to kind of wrap in to highlight the importance of those things that I have found in my experience in transforming conflict.
That is excellent. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. This has been so much good information. I hope y'all were taking notes. I was taking notes. Definitely going to watch this one again. But so it's about time to move into question and answer. But before we do that, where can people find you? What are you up to lately? You know, when you're not solving people's pizza arguments or cutting your own hair.
That's a fun one to solve. So I do a couple of different things. I'm kind of in different spaces. So working with individuals, one of the things that I do is conflict assessment and coaching. And so I help people by figuring out, we work together to do an assessment to figure out what your constructive and destructive, it's not therapy, what your responses to conflict are. So specifically, like, what are your behaviors? How do you manage your triggers? And then we do conflict coaching around how to develop more constructive coping mechanisms, and then lower your destructive ways to respond to conflict. So, and that's usually like a succession model that I do. And then some people like stay in and do more. And then some people like to have like situation specific coaching, like with a boss or a, you know, whoever, you know, they're in a relationship. So that's one thing I do with individuals is conflict coaching. I also, from an organizational perspective, will go into organizations or communities. And when they have an existing conflict, and I go in and kind of assess the situation and then help come up with a plan or a strategy to help, you know, in doing that. I do quite a bit of training in communication and conflict. I do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So a lot of different things. I do a lot of workshops and training and seminars and coaching and mediation. I mediate. I don't do family mediations, and I don't particularly do a lot of litigated mediation, but I like the mediations that are like before people have sued each other type of mediation. So if you're interested in any of those things, the best way to reach me is through my email, which is betty@bettysnyder.com.
All right, I'll drop that in the chat. So
and
Betty?
my web, yeah.
Oh no, keep going. Go on. I'll ask you in a minute.
And then my website is bettysnyder.com. And it's not completely updated, so email's probably best.
You need to show off the bunnies.
Yeah,
That's the most important part.
Let me grab one. My office mates are my consultants over here. I have two bunnies down here. I'll grab one. One of them is not, she's not real hip on coming out. So let me get the other. Oh my goodness. Okay, you're gonna laugh, but he's got a bad haircut.
How did that happen?
He got sick and he was eating his fur, and so he has fur that hangs over his face, just his face, but the rest of his body, it's kind of a mullet, right?
Yeah. I wonder who did that.
But this is little Spike. This is his first podcast appearance. Is he like honestly the cutest thing you've ever seen?
He's the cutest little baby.
Look at his nose.
What's his
name? Spike, because he usually before I cut his hair has a big spike on his. So
cute.
Oh, that is too much. Okay, so he needs to be here with us for the Q&A, which we have time for a few questions.
Yes, Spike like the gremlin, because that's honestly what his hair looks like before I just cut it off. He just has this big spike sticking out.
Oh goodness.
Lovely. And his partner, her name is Miss Bixby, and they cuddle down here.
So cute.
I love it so much.
I know, they're so sweet. They're my happiness.
Yes, I think they're what we need to emotionally regulate and solve conflict. Just send the bunnies.
Yeah. Definitely how I emotionally regulate. Yeah.
I'm like, that was my kitties. I have a bad day and I get snuggles and lap time. And I'm like, I love you so much. And thank you for giving me stress relief. And I love you so much.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're enjoying Spike being here, we do have a few questions from the audience. We answered a lot of them as we went along, which was awesome.
Yes, I know I missed some.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's perfect. That's why we save them up. So we've got a few questions in here. We'll get through a few before we move on to our wrap up and hangout. The first one someone asked is, what documentaries have you been featured in or been a part of?
I'm gonna laugh because I can't remember the name of one of them. I'm struggling. Okay, so one of them I know for sure. I wrote a book with Nathan Williams it's about solitary confinement and death row in Texas prisons. Not a real cheerful topic, but we did also did a documentary, and that's actually free online. And it's called, if you, Kara, if you Google The Darkest Hour documentary, Good Media Press, you'll be able to see the link on Vimeo.
Let me get it.
I would do it, but I got a bunny.
Yeah, that's
There's that
important.
One. The other one was about diversity in schools. It was a school that that created it, actually won an award, and I'm totally blanking out on the name of it, but I can get it for.
Yeah.
Wait,
tell me The Darkest Hour.
So The Darkest Hour, just type in The Darkest Hour documentary, Good Media Press.
Good
all
Media
in one
Press.
Line. Yeah. Okay. And then you should be able to see it come up.
Okay. I'm going to put that in the chat. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yes, it's major shit show. Yes, right. It's very heavy topic for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Ooh, we're getting a few more questions. Let me write those down too.
Yeah. So I have another question. Do you think there's hope that we can start having more productive conversations around devices issues in society as a general? And what can we do as individuals to actually facilitate really healthy conversations around these devices issues that we're having?
So I'm not going to lie. Some days I have hope, some days I don't. But I have more hope than I don't. And the hope that I see is from seeing a lot of people want to change the conversation and committing to being a part of changing the conversation. And that's by learning the skills on how to have the conversation and learning to approach these conversations in a different way. And so I encourage people to be, sometimes I call interrupters. How do we interrupt conversations? Some conversations need to be interrupted. For me, if I'll see sexism, racism, homophobia, all those things, sometimes we just hear these conversations, we don't say anything. It's what can I say that's actually going to help change the conversation? So transform the conversation doesn't necessarily mean end it, but how do we ask questions? I can give you an example. In my Facebook feed, and I have people that will post something that I'm just oh my gosh, I just want to go in and just be awful and ugly. But I'm watching all of my Facebook friends be awful and ugly to each other, adults, And so I'll go in there and I'll say, gosh, isn't it really sad that in 8th grade, we all had conversations and we respected each other and honored each other's dignity. And it was just mic drop. And then people just start talking differently after that. And one time I said, gosh, I wonder if our kids saw this conversation, would they be proud of us for how we deal with conflict? Just asking curious questions that are they're non-judgmental, but they're kind of pointing out what's going on. Or, I'm wondering if, are we making progress by name calling? I'd really like to change the way that we're talking about this to actually make progress. We're all smart people here in this room. How can we actually do something? So how can we be conscious about our own actions and our own words? And am I contributing to the division, or am I contributing to the unity of this situation? Right? So yeah, I have hope, but we have to do things differently. We're not good at talking about things that are uncomfortable. We're not just born with that, and we need to learn, and we need to be courageous. And I believe everybody here can be courageous. Yeah, politicians are not good role models, most of them.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I believe in getting all my advice from old men now living in the 21st century.
That's scary.
Speaking of which, we now have a question in the chat currently. Have you ever thought about getting into politics?
No.
No.
No,
He's too smart for that.
No, but I have mediated public policy disputes and have worked with politicians in both coaching capacities and mediation capacities. And I've also been a part of training lots of politicians in dialogue and interest-based negotiation and working with constituencies and things like that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So do you find that to be very different if you're dealing with like a political client? Is that a very different framework than if you're dealing with, say a regular person dealing with
what's so interesting, what I have found is that like the underlying issues with conflict are the same, whether it's a couple fighting or a genocide. Like the underlying needs, it's you're trying to take my rights away, you're trying to take my power away, people being triggered, ego involved, needing to be right and wrong. I mean, it divides relationships and it brings war, so if we can get to the common needs and the common interests, if we can find common needs and common interests, and if we can communicate in ways that bring progress, I see the same dynamics regardless of what. Now the groups are bigger, right, with politicians, and the group, you have bigger constituencies, you have a lot more people to please and a lot more dynamics involved, but a lot of the core issues are the same. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Well, it makes perfect sense because we're all human at the core.
Yeah.
And all of us want to feel safe, and all of us want to feel that we're heard and we're validated and stuff like that. It's just that these people tend to have more power, and to them, there's more at stake and stuff. So, and
Absolutely.
like, if I'm right, then I'm safe.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And even sometimes they know. I spoke with a pediatrician, a politician, when I was writing the book of solitary confinement, and it's a human rights perspective. So obviously I'm arguing that it's damaging and not a good thing for public health. And when I talked to some of the politicians who were drafting legislation around it, they said, yeah, we know it's bad, we know it's harmful, but if we say that we're not going to do it, or that we're going to improve the lives of the prisoners, and people are going to think I'm soft on crime, I wouldn't get votes. So again, there's fear, what are people's interests, and how fear is dictating and creating legislation. So,
Man.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues involved.
Yeah, a lot at stake.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you going? I don't
Nope.
care.
Nope,
Okay.
you're up.
So, flipping it on, not from politics, but to religion. How would you respond to a religionist who says God says as to why what they say is right? So they refer to God as to justify what they're saying is right.
I have a smile on my face because it reminds me of a mediation that I did, and it was about, the mediation was I'm trying to say this in a way that it basically was about whether or not strip clubs should be in a certain area. And one of the women who didn't want it in her area, at the very end of the mediation, we had agreed on everything, like basically, there was concerns about safety or noise or, the sign or whatever. So we had like 2 full days mediation with lots of stakeholders. And we reached a complete agreement that was going to meet all the interests. And at the end of the mediation, she said, I'm not going to sign this because God's not going to let this happen, because God said it's wrong. And it was like, Okay. So one of the things, kind of flip it around, it's like, that's really interesting, because if that's the argument, well, God let the strip club be over in the other area. Like, why is it this? That's why I'm giggling, because I was like totally perplexed by that. There are going to be people that always have it's called moral authority. It's a type of power. If you read about like power, people will have that as a type of power, that they'll say, well, it's because of this. And it's hard to argue with God, right? With someone's perception of God. And so that to me comes back to, how are you going to kind of prepare for that type of argument and that type of response? Because you're not going to change their mind if that is their authority. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like,
Yes.
how do you, and I think different people would handle it differently. Some people will try to handle it intelligently and try to like kind of poke holes in their argument. And that's not gonna, usually they're not gonna change, right? They're not gonna poking a hole. Sorry, I'm having a so that, that can just be really difficult. I'd love to know, how other people deal with that conflict. Sometimes when somebody has said that to me, I'll just say, something along the lines of, it sounds like you're really certain on your position, and you're telling me you don't want to continue this conversation about looking at, any other alternative thoughts, beliefs, or explanations. Because you might even, you'll start pulling in a different argument and say, well, that's not how Jesus felt around the, they're going to just disregard that and then just pull this fact.
And then you'll get
it's
pulled
bias.
into a religious debate rabbit hole instead of what the original topic you were even fucking talking about.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens, because it's happened to me.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And the other thing sometimes is asking a question like, so that's interesting. It sounds like you feel, really solid around that belief. And I'm wondering, within your belief system, what does compassion look like? Right? What does love look like? What does, but you might get down that same rabbit trail. Yeah. You have to kind of assess with the person. Those are often futile discussions. What does empathy look like? Right.
Yeah. I call it, I'm trying to nail Jello to a tree.
Yeah. I don't have a good, comeback, other than to find a common interest. How do you feel people should be treated? I don't know. I have to be in the situation. And sometimes, that the people you're talking to might be like this open. Like what's that opening? But it's not your responsibility necessarily to change. Sometimes we got to walk away.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, speaking of ending the conversation, this has been fantastic and amazing, and I love it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Insights.
Can I say one last, really last thing? I wanted. This is
yes.
There was a question about trauma.
Oh, yes.
And I want to address that. Somebody, I don't remember what the specific question was, but was about trauma. And there was a couple about trauma. Conflict. People who have experienced trauma are going to have a hard time with the barometer of, is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? Conflict reaction on behalf of someone, right? If someone's yelling, you might have a hard time delineating what's abuse versus what's just a normal trigger that somebody had, right? And so I would definitely encourage you to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Helen.
I have a book.
You what?
I have a book to recommend if I can pull it up. Go ahead, keep talking.
Yes.
Keep talking.
Oh, I wanted to say that, and that can be really scary and really confusing place to be. And so I really would encourage you to talk to a therapist about that specializes in trauma. Secular Therapy Project, seculartherapy.org. And really try to make sure I didn't want to ignore such an important topic. It's definitely something to get to dig into a little bit deeper. You deserve it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we definitely want to refer people that way if that is what they need. Yeah. Oh, and thanks. I see the link from.
Ooh, I'm gonna get that.
Yeah, it's a
Oh, I
great
like
book
that.
about
thank
understanding
you.
the difference between trauma and conflict and how to
Ooh.
recognize your own triggers and how to take responsibility for what you own and what other people need to take
Ooh.
responsibility for. Yeah. And it's a really, really good book, and it helped me deal with my own trauma and dealing with abuse and conflict. So, and
Thank you for
understanding the
that.
difference. So yeah, it's a very, very good book.
I just bought it. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a great book.
Great.
I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you both for that. And thank you everybody else for joining us. And of course, this will not be the last RfRx. We will be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And we're going to be talking about when your partner leaves God. What happens when one partner doesn't believe? What happens when the foundation of your relationship is no longer the foundation? And Sherry D'Souza will be joining us to share her experiences and insights navigating different faiths in a marriage relationship. And spoiler alert, you may recognize a certain other returning guest host who will also be joining the conversation to share his perspectives on the same issue too. So definitely looking forward to that. And as we mentioned at the beginning, all of the previous RfRx recordings can be found on our YouTube channel. We are a little bit behind, but we're getting caught up, so keep checking back. And also any questions, comments, inquiries, death threats, you can send them to me at rfrx@recoveryfromreligion.org. And don't forget about the blog and the podcast. I'm dropping all those in the chat. And Helen, do you want to mention the social medias?
Yes, follow us on all your social medias because you know you want to. So you can go to our Facebook main page. You can go to our Facebook support group page. You can follow us on the Twitter. You can follow us on the Instagram, on the TikToks. Find out about what's going on with Recovering from Religion. Find out about our podcasts, our excursion, about our meetings, all that crazy stuff. Please follow us on all the social media. Go to sign up for our newsletter, which you can find out more where we post like articles and more information about recovering from religion will come straight to your email box, and you'll be super excited and you'll want to open it right away when you see it. So please do those things. Also, and it will cover like also our recent blog posts and all that jazzy stuff. So do that. Follow us on all the social medias, people, because you'll be a step ahead for me. I follow on most at all, so you have to beat me at it. So also too, we're going to post our second feedback poll, see how much you like this talk and all that jazzy stuff. So that's going to keep going. And while that is up, I am going to introduce you to our fearless leader, our president, Darrel Ray, so he can talk about this talk and give us his final thoughts and all that wonderful jazzy stuff. So take it away, Darrel.
Hey, thanks, Helen and Dr. Snyder. Thanks so much for this. This is really informative and I thought very practical. I would say the first thing, though, that I would always recommend is 3 deep breaths. That's like the most practical thing you can do in these situations. And I'm glad you mentioned that several times in there. Yeah. And I really
Thanks
like
for having me.
Oh, yeah. Well, we all can benefit from this kind of talks. I also liked your meta. I think getting meta and asking questions from a meta perspective, that's a hard skill to develop, but you gave us all a lot of different meta type of questions, and they really get us out of our own emotions and help us become a better observer of just what's going on here, and rather than getting sucked into the rabbit hole. And I do love rabbits, and my I won't go down that rabbit hole. I have lots of rabbits. I have probably 50 of them on my property.
Wow.
Yeah, they're actually wild rabbits, so they're not, I don't pet them, that's for sure. There was one question you asked, and I thought, well, that's an interesting question. How do you know you're done? How do you know you're done? And I think that would be an interesting question to ask before you ever get in. How do I know when this has gone too far? Because I've been a victim of my own not knowing when I'm done many times in my life. And I end up getting all upset. And 3 days later, I'm still thinking about the stupid, why didn't I get out of that sooner? You know, so I think just being a little more intentional and mindful about what you're doing there, if you're going to get in those kind of conversations. All right, well, moving right along, I want to say that, Kara, I'm going to give you the Perverted Pizza Kink Award for the day. And I'm going to give Helen the Best Silent Judger Award for the day. I think you both did an outstanding job in both of those.
We both win.
We both
Yeah,
win. Go
both
us.
I was getting rather concerned that you're having way too much fun with this talk, way too much laughs for such a serious topic. So anyway, thanks for putting it together anyway. And if you want to help us more, you can always donate, because those donations go to help subsidize things like the excursion or other activities that we're doing. And next week, we're going to hear from Sasha and Sherry. And Gail and I are all excited because Gail and I think some other RfR volunteers are going to be going to Australia to drum up awareness for recovery from religion and religious trauma. We'll be kind of on a speaking tour around the country in the next February, March, I believe it is. And when you donate to help us do that kind of thing, and put the excursion on stuff. So, and last of all, and certainly not least, you can volunteer, which you've already heard about earlier. Thanks, Kara.